Good evening. Buenas noches. Hello. Miren, cállese la boca por un momentito. Could we take our seats? ¿Podemos tomar nuestros asientos? So that we can begin tonight's event. Vamos a tomar nuestros asientos. Let us take our seats so that we can begin with our event tonight. I'm going to ask the panelists to please come forward. Carlos Vargas, Dr. Carlos Vargas Ramos, Reverend Fred Davey, Bishop Raymond Rivera, and Erica Gonzalez. Is Erica here? Y Elieser Valentin. I didn't even know his name was Elieser. I've always known him as Eli. Come up front too. Erica's here, right? I want to welcome everyone to Union Theological Seminary, to this event for this book launch of Eli Valentin. Quiero darle la bienvenida a todo el seminario Union Theological Seminary. My name is Samuel Cruz. Yo soy Samuel Cruz. I'm a associate professor of religion and society here at Union. Soy profesor de religión y sociedad aquí en Union Seminary. I'm really glad and honored to host this event. Fred, you can come. I'm really honored and happy to hold this event on this very important book. In my opinion, un libro is a very important book because we don't have a lot of people in the Puerto Rican Latino community who write on these subjects. No tenemos mucha gente en nuestra comunidad que escriben sobre estos temas. And besides that, Eli is a good friend. Y encima de eso, Eli es un buen amigo. We talk all the time. I call him Mr. Niebuhr Jr., because he liked the work of Reinhold Niebuhr. And I thought when he said he was writing a book on Niebuhr, but he ended up writing this book with the strange title, Politicking, in the Barrio. Pero terminó escribiendo este libro. But I'm really excited to be here and with these great panelists this evening, and I think we're going to have a good time. Creo que vamos a tener un buen tiempo oyendo de esto y escuchando del autor también. So, without further ado, I think I'm going to ask Eli to say a few words before we go into the... I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
Oh, thank you. I'm filled with so much joy. I can't even express it in words. I mean, this show of support is one of those moments that leave me speechless. And for those that know me, you know how hard it is for me to be speechless. Wow. First of all, I'm afraid to do this because there's so many people here. You all are important, all of you, and each of you have contributed to my own formation in some capacity. But out of all the greatness that is here, let me just quickly highlight a few people that I need to say a special thank you to, if you don't mind. And if you see the acknowledgement section, it's a pretty lengthy acknowledgement. And that's because I've learned that none of this is possible unless there's community that supports and makes this happen. This could not have been done without all of you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So thank you so much for being part of my life and part of my own formation and development. And speaking of formation and development, I just told Erica this, and now you all will hear it. My kindergarten teacher, Isabel, we used to call her Maquiavelo because that was her married name then, ¿verdad? It was? Huh? Maiden name. Oh, okay. Boricua from Sunset Park. My kindergarten teacher is right there. Can you say hello? That's my kindergarten teacher. And Miss Rodriguez, I always call her Miss Rodriguez. She was the principal of my elementary school, the Hostos Academy, which was a bilingual school in East Harlem. She's also right there. I mean, they taught me how to read and write. Literally. Thank you so much. They've always supported me from the very beginning, and so many of you that are here today, thank you from the bottom. I mean, some of you come from, like Dr. Agosto from Connecticut. Mary, my colleague here at UDN in the DMIN program, she came from Connecticut, and from Long Island. So many of you, thank you so much. Elected officials, judges, Judge Lisa Headley's here. Adam Clayton Powell is here. Jose Rivera's here. Joel Rivera's here. Oh my, Bob Anasagasti, a legend in East Harlem, is right here. One of my mentors, Mike Nieves, is right there in the back. Javier Nieves, another former assemblyman. My goodness, I'm just filled with so much love, appreciation. And another judge is walking in. Angel Cruz is here. My goodness, thank you. Real fast, and I'm going to sit down because I really want to listen to this distinguished panel. But I wrote this book for one reason. And this is a collection of columns and essays that I've written over the last 8 years. So it's not like a typical book that has one key argument and all these chapters supporting that argument. This is a collection of essays over the last 8 years. I thought it was time to give some type of idea of how our politics has developed over the last decade. And I hope that it does that. But I wrote it for one reason. My son Gabriel, who's in the back, he asked me just 2 weeks ago, Dad, why do you only write about Latinos? That's what he said. He said, why do you only write about Latinos? And I told Gabe, well, there he goes. Gabe, raise your hand. There he goes. He asked the question, why do you only write about Latinos? And I told him, well, somebody has to speak for the voiceless. Someone has to speak for the voiceless. And so many of us here do. And I just want to contribute mi granito, right, to what we're all doing, because we have to keep speaking about our people. It is our story, and we have to tell it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So the strangest thing, and I think that this is probably happening because there are a lot of Haitian voodoo practitioners in here. y santero. So the spirit is moving. Where's that Haitian woman that's Dominican? Oh, no, she's hiding. She doesn't want to admit she practices voodoo. I don't know why. I know most of you do, just in hiding. There was an article written about me like 10 years ago, and they asked me, what inspired you to become a professor, to teach? And I said, my Sunday school teacher. And when I was like 6, and guess what her last name was? Machabelo. It's Isabel's mother. And it's in writing, and Isabel came to my church a week or two after that, and I said it there, and I showed her the magazine. So isn't it a small world? I guess the Machabelo women were powerful people. Anyway, what I'm going to ask is all the panelists to give a brief introduction or summary of what they thought about the book, and then we could enter into some questions and answers afterwards. So I'm going to start with Reverend Fred Davey. You can sit. Come up.
Thank you. I am Reverend Fred Davey. As Professor Cruz said, I serve as the Senior Executive Vice President here at Union for Public Theology and Civic Engagement. I'm in my 15th year, and I'm about to retire, and I can't wait. It's been an excellent run here. On behalf of our president, Serene Jones, I want to bring greetings and I want to congratulate Eli on the book and thank Professor Cruz for helping to organize tonight's gathering. So, I have a little bit of jump on you who haven't read Eli's writings over the years, because I have. And I've had an opportunity to have lots of conversations with him, at least over 2 decades right about now, about his understanding of politics in New York City and in the country, particularly from, obviously, a Latino point of view, but enriched by his vast knowledge of just politics in general in America. We worked closely on a number of political campaigns. Most recently, we were deeply involved with the faith effort on behalf of President Biden in 2020. Reverend Derek Harkins, Eli is here, who is now at Virginia Union Theological Seminary along with you, and he was very much involved. He was actually, I guess, the faith director in 2020 for the Biden presidential campaign. And so in reading Eli's writings in this book and others, the thing that most resonates with me, and I think the thing that I have learned the most over these 2 decades of knowing Eli and being privileged to be able to delve into his thinking, is that there's no monolithic Latino. That being Latino is a multidimensional phenomenon in this country and in the world. And that a huge mistake that many leaders and many public officials, people like me in administrative positions make, is to approach Latino life, Latino community, Latino culture, if I might, as if it is unidimensional. And so I've had my horizons broadened a great deal to come to understand and to respect that vast diversity, and to come to understand and respect that no one person can ever speak for a complete group of people, and that we have to be extremely careful about how we engage in that. Sure, we all, as Eli said, want to be a voice for the voiceless. And it's very important for Black and brown people in New York City and beyond to have people as articulate as Eli and other Latino leaders in New York and beyond to speak on behalf of the community and its issues. But it becomes suspect when any one person claims to speak for everybody. So I've held on to that, Eli, over this time. I've tried to catch myself when I found myself either one, being a reductionist and believing that, falling into this trap of believing that there is a unidimensional aspect to being Latino, but also being suspect of any leader or any person who would try to promote that particular point of view. So I want to thank you for that, Eli, but for so much more. I look forward to hearing from our fellow panelists. I assume we're going to hear from the audience at some point too, so I look forward to hearing from you. But I want to welcome you to Union. I want to thank Eli again for this book. And Eli's a young man, so I'm an old man. I'm about to step off the stage. He's just stepping into the middle of the stage. And he has a lot to offer and to give in the ways in which he will lead both this city and this country, the theological community here, the faith community more broadly, so that in and through this next century, particularly in terms of how we engage the diverse Latino communities of this city and of the country. So thank you.
I have a little bio here of all the panelists, and I apologize, Fred, that I didn't do the bio. I just want to mention, Fred's a very humble man, but he is one of the most connected, sorry, I know you're shy, people I know in this country. And it's no exaggeration, politically. Many years ago, he was the chief of staff of Ruth Messenger, was it? Deputy Borough President. So he's been around in the politics of New York City for many years. Just quickly, when you were mentioning Eli, I thought of something that when I speak to Eli sometimes, en español, bueno, I don't know if this is the right one, como que se le baja el mo, como que you get, sometimes I go down, but not for bad reasons. Eli is so perceptive about politics that my utopian ideas sometimes get smashed. But I think that's why we need people who do this type of political work, so we could stay real with what's going on. Our next panelist is Bishop Raymond Rivera, who has served as a pastor, preacher, denominational executive, organization founder, community builder. He founded the Latino Pastoral Action Center, which started in New York City, in the Bronx, but in a building that would belong to the New York Mission Bible Society. Dr. Rivera, Bishop Rivera, is I look at him as the Christian organizer, community-based person per excellence, or urban ministry person per excellence. I think he's well known throughout the city, so Bishop.
Good evening. It's a privilege for me to be here, especially to support Eli. I know Eli in another capacity. Eli brings to this conversation the intersection of theology, religion, and the public square, because he's also an ordained minister, college and seminary trained, and he is now emerging, in my opinion, as our voice as a political scientist. And I want to affirm that role in him. I think since the passing of Angelo Falcón, which was kind of somewhat our voice, whether you agreed with him or not, he certainly was the person in that space. And I think that since that space, apart from maybe Howard Jordan on Facebook and maybe a couple of other people, we see an absence of political commentary in our community. And you may say, well, Dr. Rivera, Bishop, but that's not true. We have so many intellectuals. But I believe that sometimes they speak to themselves. In other words, the conversation is in the academy and it doesn't get to the grassroots level. I think Eli, because of what he's developing with his articles in newspapers, political journals, because he is organically part of our grassroots community, is hopefully filling that vacuum. And I hope he continues to grow in it. We need it. If you believe that, say amen. I think we need that voice. We need those emerging voices that are connected to the base to complement the academy and for there to be a creative tension with the academy. I'm going to make 3 quick points. I think this book contributes to our institutional corporate memory. And I think it's needed because from a religious perspective, Passover is that for the Jewish community. Every time you celebrate this meal, you know that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. So what Passover does for the Jewish community, it gives them institutional memory, corporate memory. And the sacraments for us, every time we as Christians participate in the Lord's Supper, what it does also, it says, every time you eat of this bread and you drink of this cup, you remember that Jesus died for us. So again, those ceremonies are about institutional memory, corporate memory. It connects us to the history. And this book connects us to the history of the Puerto Rican Latino community. And we need more books that connect us because our new generation, what Gabriel said to his father, why are you writing about Latinos? And our new generation has that challenge. And quickly, that brings me to my second point, that our new generation, and even I'm 79, so I don't count, but even the 40 and 50-year-olds, they have a tension. And the tension is, as you assimilate and you acculturate to this dominant culture, and you internalize the values, the more you do that, if you're not careful, the more disconnected you become from your community. So upward mobility is a blessing and a curse. Because the more you move up, the more you can internalize the values of the dominant culture and develop a condescending attitude toward your own people. And I think this book also talks about gentrification, talks about grassroots activism, talks about the political history, the organizations. And let me just, as I conclude, part of that history is sitting right here among us. 2 of my political history heroes, I've been involved since I was 19 years old as a pastor, is Baba Sagasti, one of the leaders from East Harlem of 40, 50 years, Jose Rivera, elder political statements in our community, and that history has been lost. If you ask our new generation who these people are, some of them wouldn't know the history of the anti-poverty program, the history of community organizing, the fact that the anti-poverty program challenged Tammy Hall, and it was the anti-poverty program, both in the black community and the Latino community, that challenged the political establishment of the Italian and Irish political clubs. Without that institutional memory, these younger generations will be disconnected from that. I think this book is the beginning of that. It deals with these issues of grassroots activism and gentrification. It deals with identity, and you can't separate identity from politics. So all of those things, as I read it, all of those issues resonated with me, and me and Dr. Cruz are trying to encourage our PhD students here, and I would suggest that we do it everywhere. Stop writing about white people. Let's write about our own people. Come on, say amen. We need to write about our own people. But that's the tension. Since we want acceptance in the dominant academic culture, and that's controlled by whites, we think that the road is to legitimatize ourselves but by writing about them. But like Eli, we should follow that example and begin to write about our own people. I want to thank you for listening to me.
I heard my name mentioned. Don't take his word for it. I got to hear what he said earlier. We want to just acknowledge also that this place is full of judges apparently today. Judge Lumari Maldonado Cruz is with us too. I want to introduce at this moment Carlos Vargas Ramos. I was telling Carlos that when I met him many years ago, I was super happy with the work he does because, again, he's someone like Eli who deals with data. And sometimes when you, what was that? No, he's a real political science, but we don't want to say that because you're real in another way. But he does a lot of stuff with statistics and data, quantitative analysis. So he takes people like me, who are Christian, Marxist, revolutionary types, independentista, and he brings us down to earth sometimes, because sometimes we're thinking only in the clouds, although we need that to be utopian. Carlos is the Director for Public Policy, External and Media Relations and Development, a political scientist by training. Carlos is co-editor of Puerto Ricans at the Dawn of the New Millennium, and author, among others, of The Role of State Actors in Puerto Rico's Long Century of Migration. And you're still with the Centro, right? Carlos is with the Centro for Puerto Rico. Well, that's where he's Director of Public Policy at the Centro for Puerto Rican Studies. So we welcome you this evening.
Buenas tardes, good evening. For me, it's a pleasure to be here too. I was actually very touched when Eli approached me and said, Carlos, would you mind being part of this event tonight? And I was more than happy to do it because I think that this book is important, right? And it is true. This book is not an academic book, right? And it wasn't meant to be an academic book. But it's a book that is very important for academics, right? Because sometimes when we engage in that conversation between intellectuals, right, that oftentimes forgets other audiences, we tend to abstract many issues and in that abstraction, things are lost. But here, Eli is able to, con nombre y apellido, he names names. He actually is telling a story that is useful also for academics. We can then go back and cross-reference and check and verify and say, well, Eli said that in his book, and now I'm able to quote some of the things that are written here when I do my quote-unquote academic work, right? And it is important to also know that the work that we try to do at the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, and we are an academic institution, we are a research institute, but we also want to break down the walls of academia, right? We want to bring the knowledge that is created in academia and bring it to the public at large. And I think that is in that spirit that I see the work that Eli has done. The fact that, he knowing how academia works, being able to nevertheless speak to the broader public. And that is a tremendous service to the community. And I applaud you for that, Eli. So I really wanted to make that point. Also, I just try to bring people to reality just because I'm an empiricist. Even though we can talk about how things should be, we oftentimes also need to explain how things are, right? And I think that oftentimes in our desire to make things happen, we forget how it is that things work or don't work because, hey, there is a way things are that we also need to explain and content with if we want change, right? And that's why I find that, for instance, in Politicking in the Barrio, Eli, with his hope that we are able to achieve our potential, he also tells it like it is, saying, we are not there yet, right? Even though we could increase the number of elected officials that are Latino and Latina in New York City, in New York State, throughout the country, we have yet to achieve our potential because we are short. We still don't come out to vote to the extent that come out to vote. We know that the political institutions that should help us come out to vote and become engaged, by and large, don't do it. Our institutions, as vibrant as they are in many facets, we don't have the deep pockets that are needed to participate effectively in the political process. So I see, to some extent, Eli not struggling, but grappling with the fact that we wish, we've made many strides, but we still have a long way to go because we have yet to reach our potential. And that is definitely well reflected in this book. So Eli is telling it like it is, also projecting some hope. Naming names, I love that, right? And I also see this as a continuation of the work that another political scientist, que tenía un tremendo látigo, Angelo Falcón, provided us with, right? You were mentioning, Eli, why it is that you write about Latinos. Yeah, because if we don't do it, nobody will, right? So it has to come from us in order to educate ourselves, in order to give testimony to what we have done. And that is what a book like this does. And that's what I get out of this book. So congratulations, Eli.
Last but not least, we also have with us Erika Gonzalez Martinez, who serves as Director of Power for Puerto Rico, a national coalition of largely Puerto Rican diaspora leaders and groups advocating for Puerto Rico. As the former executive editor of El Diario La Prensa, Erika conceptualized September 11th, the Latino Experience, a groundbreaking multi-platform series about the impact of this devastating event on Latino workers, immigration policy, the New York City mayoral race, and gentrification. Prior to this position, she served as the publication's opinion page editor and wrote hundreds of hard-hitting editorials that helped move momentum for landmark changes, including reforms to the vestiges of the Rockefeller drug laws and the introduction of a domestic workers' Bill of Rights in New York State. She currently serves on the boards of Women's Media Center, City Limits, and Economy Project. And she's the only woman on the panel. Let's stand up and give her a hand.
Okay, thank you for that intro. So I am here because this is a topic, obviously, that interests me, but as we know, first of all, I want to congratulate Eli because it's not easy to publish a book. It takes a lot of focus, discipline. It's not a linear process unless you're like, one of these lucky people that gets like $100,000 to just park yourself to the side in a chateau someplace in another continent and write straight. So I know that it's not an easy process, and I appreciate that level of commitment. But Eli is someone when you're around him, you can tell that he's a person of high integrity, and you can tell that he's focused on examination and interrogation because he cares about our community and he cares about it succeeding. And he sees, as Carlos says, the potential, the aspiration. And I learned so much from it, especially on the data front. And we've had, and as many of you know, there's the conversation that we have entre nosotros and then the conversation that we have afuera. And sometimes we need to push the conversation from adentro to afuera, because especially now in the midst of such attempts to erase us, to erase our information, to change the narrative, to invisibilize it, especially for Latinos, when you understand that we have our representation across the board is in the single digits when it comes to Latino studies, when it comes to who gets published, when it comes to who's on these shows. If you look at MSN Now on any given day or CNN, you will not see a Latino at the table, not invited. At the Women's Media Center, which I work with, a few years ago, we did a report on the guests who were invited to these roundtables, and Latinas were at that point, were less than 2% of those invited, and I'm sure that it's worse. But part of our struggle, because we know our capability. This is a community that pushed the U.S. Navy out of Vieques. This is a community that established bilingual education in New York City as a policy that's far-reaching and for generations of people. This is a community, and some of those leaders were in the room, that is so politically sophisticated. The reason why our political prisoners were liberated is because when Hillary Clinton was running for Senate, the Puerto Rican leadership got together and said, if you want our backing, your president has to sign off on pardoning those political prisoners. I believe Jose Rivera was a part of that conversation. So Sonia Sotomayor, everyone is celebrating her during Women's History Month, but the framing as often, which is where people feel comfortable about our community, is as individual aspiring success stories, when there were specific footholds put in place to make sure that she could be appointed and ascend throughout the judiciary and be in a position. And mind you, we were the smallest of the Latino communities that had people that could be potentially nominated to the Supreme Court, and yet the Puerto Rican nominee was pushed through. So, I want us, when we talk about Latino politicking in El Barrio, to understand that there are many stories about our success, in spite of people trying to get in the way of our success, of us pushing through and outmaneuvering, being sophisticated, organizing, and so many stories that are not told. So I really am deeply grateful to Eli for focusing and pushing this conversation. And I hope that we all leave today asking other folks to support the book, because if we don't support, who's going to support? So purchasing the book, posting it on social media, helping Eli with really getting this book, bringing visibility to this book. So congratulations again, Eli.
So we don't want to keep you here too long, but I have several questions for the panel, and I just ask that you be as short as possible. I'm not picking on anybody, but Bishop, just kidding. We're good friends. I love Raymond, so I'm just kidding. But the first question for the panel is, and you could speak to it as you want. I'm not going to choose you. You could all speak to it. Is Latinos are one of the fastest growing political constituencies in the United States and in New York. Yet political power has not always matched demographic growth. Why is that gap still present, do you think? Let's start with Carlos.
Numbers, demographics are really important politically in this country because it is seen as an indicator of potential strength. So it's almost like, I'm making a deposit on the power that I am going to accomplish decades from now, perhaps. However, when that power is not realized, we undermine ourselves. So in this country, in this city in particular, we've seen it through ethnic manifestation. Today, some folks are celebrating St. Patrick's Day, San Patricio, right? They were very important in helping shape ethnic politics in New York City as they were trying to make their way into the city, and they were facing tremendous discrimination. They organized, they marched, they took over the political structures that allowed them to take over at the time, and to convert those numbers into actual political power. Later on, after the 1920s, when the reform movement came about and they began with literacy tests, and they began with poll taxes, and they began with all these disenfranchising measures, the only alternative that people had to project a potential for actual power was seeing in numbers. And that has continued on, particularly in this quote-unquote land of immigrants. That potential was seen down the generations, down the road. And that's why the fact that demographics still represent, well, we better contend with this group because they are going to be a force to contend with down the road.
Fred, would you like to take a crack at that?
So I'm not Latino, so I'm
Oh, we didn't know.
honorary. All right. So one of the when I mentioned that one of the things in the book, one of the things I learned from Eli is about the sort of diversity of the Latino community. One of the things you point out in the book is that diversity often leads to tensions, and the need to build coalitions, do organizing, etc. So rather than try to answer this question as someone who doesn't feel qualified to answer it, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask it of Eli, if I might. Where are you seeing the best examples in order to realize this full potential of the Latino community here in New York and across the country? Where are you seeing the best examples of efforts to overcome the tensions that result from the diversity of the Latino community?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Fred.
Good way of getting me off the spot, too.
Thank you for the question. And I'll be very fast. And it's interesting because there's some people, as I think about the question, there's some people in this room that are doing work and have done work for a number of years that I think have, I think dispelled some of the, or try to undo some of these even intra-Latino Latino squabbling, right? And tensions that exist. But there are many people here that have done the opposite. Eddie Cuesta's here from Dominicanos USA. And these are folk that, right, they respect what came before, they honor what came before, and they work, right? They work towards building the potential for this, right, pan-Latino identity and reality. I think that's so many of us know needs to happen, right? He just came in. Where is he? Juan from Naleo, right? Marlene is here. Elvin is here. I mean, these are fellow Quisqueyanos, right? That have formed part of this, right, body politic, and we're in this together. So I think, right, there's a lot happening and much more that needs to happen. And I think very quickly, one more thing that Oh, and there's Manny from RWSDU, a Mexicano brother that also, right, has been in the struggle for many years. Pero there's also, I think this, I don't know if resurgence is the right word, but there's certainly a new appetite to work, to realize the African roots of our people. And right, and we often now hear the words Afro-Latinidad, and ya era tiempo, right? I mean, it's in our blood. It's in our, even in our skin pigmentation. So I think there's a renewed effort or this intention to realize that we even embody multiplicity, and therefore, right, this can build the necessary bridges to build among us, but also to build with other groups. Thank you. I appreciate the question.
That leads me to another question that might not seem related, but I just came to my mind, and I don't mean it as a joke, but culture plays a big role in how popular culture plays a big role in how people see things. And do you see, and I'm speaking more anecdotally by what I saw happen, after the Super Bowl halftime, I got so many calls from Latinos who are non-Puerto Rican, who all of a sudden discovered Puerto Rico in a sense, or the greatness of Puerto Rico because of Bad Bunny. So, do you think there's a role, or could we exploit that, for lack of a better word? The fact that Bad Bunny brought consciousness to people, something that many of us, by the thousands, have been trying to do for years. And in one concert, or I should say within the last year or two, he's been bringing consciousness to people. What could be the role of popular culture in politicizing our people? Would you like to respond to that, Erica?
Sure. Can you hear me? That's a really, really good, interesting question. I think, so one thing I want to say, there's a whole history of coalition building and organizing across Latino communities, also among Puerto Ricans and African Americans in New York. Now, the depth of now, is it out there as a knowledge base widely? No, and I really do feel that that's deliberate, because there are a lot of people that are invested in a divide and conquer agenda. So, and you can see it when it's on Instagram or TikTok, and you see so many people respond, oh, I had no idea that, you know, this group and that group work together, you know, and you can find hundreds of examples of that kind of collaboration, side-by-side community building. It makes sense historically. You had the mass migration of Puerto Ricans after World War II to places like Brooklyn, New York, and at the same time you had a migration from the South of African Americans that were fleeing violence and settling in Brooklyn. So, you know, it's been buried, unfortunately, and that discussion is not happening, and it's up to us, como se dice en español, to rescatar eso. When you see, you know, Eli was at our conversation on Arturo Schomburg, who was an, you know, Pan-Caribbean, who worked with African Americans, who worked with so many different communities at a time when there was no social media, you know, and he was working for Cuban liberation, Puerto Rican liberation. He was collecting, he was a global collector of Black history, and he was working across communities. So it's always been there. The problem is that we have people that are not telling that story and that are committed to another narrative. I think Bad Bunny reflects where so many young people are at. Like there's just a rapid exchange. There's boundary breaking. He comes out of a shaping, and there's a great NPR program on this. He comes out of a generation of young people that have been growing up under crisis after crisis in Puerto Rico, and who have an understanding of the world that the U.S. is not the center of the universe. That's why on the New York Times podcast, he says, you know, it's up to everybody else to learn English. You know, I'm not gonna I don't see my success based on white validation or U.S. validation. So his performance was a great reset. He was saying American is not equal to the United States. It's the United States of America. America is a larger space. And it was really beautiful that he did the roll call of countries, in particular Afro-Caribbean countries. And there were many people that were from Belize and other places that were like, wow, we never see our flag any place. So I think he is so global and he has such a viewership and he's so undeniable, and really what he represents, which is this resetting, this imagining of ourselves beyond that. So I think it's really interesting because you have such a restrictive narrative, and he was able to kind of circle around, a restrictive narrative about who we are and how our relationship to the world, and he was able to kind of curve around that, and really sees a whole global audience, and that's still reverberating with every performance that you see. So people are still talking about that performance. So it's not for me, it's not like a moment, it's a movement.
It's interesting what you're saying about the collaboration, because I've been arguing for years that the Black Latino coalition in New York City has been the most powerful one until recent times. And we don't see the contributions to Black Harlem that were made by Latinos. Anyone who knows jazz knows that Caravan is one of the classic tunes, and it was composed by a Puerto Rican, Juan Tisol. Langston Hughes, great writer and poet, was close friends with the Cuban Afro poet Nicolás Guillén. In fact, he translated Guillén's work into English. But we're not aware of all these coalitions that are there because they would rather divide us. Aline Davila, the anthropologist from NYU, wrote a book, Latino Spin, The Whitewashing of Latinos. And it's to the benefit to keep us separated. Bishop Ray, do you have any commentary on this Bad Bunny? I know you don't listen to reggaeton because you're a Pentecostal bishop, but you know who he is, right? Y la novia?
Yeah, let me qualify. I'm Reformed Pentecostal. No. I have somewhat of a different take. I think that when we look at the Latino community, we have to look at it in the larger universal context. And by that I mean that the human condition is...
Get closer to the mic.
We have to look at the Puerto Rican Latino community in the larger context, which is the universal context of the human condition. So I think when we approach this, and I think Eli does in some of the essays, he doesn't say it directly, but if you're discerning, you can see it. He doesn't romanticize the context, right? And I think that's very important. Why? The Puerto Rican community was first here. There was Puerto Rican power. Like I said, we have some of the pioneers here, Jose Rivera, Baba Sagasti. And when they rose in power in East Harlem and the South Bronx, the Tammany Hall Italians and the Tammany Hall Irish folks and the African Americans, they didn't roll over and say, here, take our power. You follow? They didn't say, welcome. They had to organize and they had to struggle within what the political process was to be able to assert themselves. And that's the rise of the anti-poverty program, community corporations that many of us served on. And it was actually taking power away from other groups that had fought for that power. So I think the human condition is that. There is creative tension, but what we have to seek in the midst of that creative tension is transcendence. And transcendence is not an easy thing to do. Why? Because the Puerto Ricans came and we established power. Then the Dominicans came and they want power and they aspire. And the Ecuadorians came in Queens and they want to assert their leadership. And the Colombians came and they want to assert their leadership. And the Caribbeans came and they said, no, no, we don't just want African Americans to represent us. We're going to run Afro-Caribbeans against you. So I think, yes, we can idolize the situation, but that's part of the human condition. And we have to navigate that process. And what can emerge from it is Pan-Africanism, Pan-Latinoism. And I think some of us see it as negative because we're so homogeneous that we always felt it was going to be Puerto Ricans, that we always felt that it was going to be Dominicans. But there's an evolution of this process, and the best we can do, I think, is what Pablo Freire said, which is to see a common history of oppression. And that's the real commonness, that all groups are oppressed, they're all seeking their liberation, and kind of every group takes its turn in that process, and not be so shocked. Pretty soon Mexicans are going to be, well, maybe they already started, are going to be running as they organize the Mexican community. I think that is organic. It's part of the natural process, and the best we can do is hopefully seek the best person within that pan group to represent us and not be so out of shape when other Latinos represent us that are not part of our group, as long as they recognize the contribution.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sam, real fast, before I left out a name, someone that's been part of that struggle for a long time in New York City, Aldrin Bonilla, who's been fighting for a long time. He's at the Fund for the City of New York. Sorry.
We're happy to have so many people here that have been working in the community. Time is brief, so some people from the audience went like, let us speak. I'm gonna let them speak. I think it's a good idea. Question, yes.
Yes, I have a question for the panelists. This is based on probability and statistics. It doesn't matter where some Latinos come from. Sometimes their parents came here and documented. Now they were born here. Now they're citizens. You have also 1.5 generations that came here as residents and other citizens. This is happening all over the U.S. with the young Latino professionals. And what's happening is that there's like a divide or two groups. One is the Latino that usually goes to business schools, engineering schools, and what do you call them, mathematics, mathematics, science, and all that. So they become professionals in those areas, right? Business, engineering. And then you have another group that becomes educated in social work and other areas. A group goes into corporate America, they become executive, they become young professionals, junior partners, they're lawyers, corporate lawyers. Others become, teachers, they work for government agencies, police departments and all that. They're both educated, but what we find is that statistically, the one group that specializes in business and engineering, they become at best independents or they become Republicans. And then you also have the other group that tend to become Democrats. My question is, there seems to be a dilemma. What should we promote? What should we say to these groups? Should you stop pursuing capitalist values and keep it with the masses, or should you? What do you think this is going in terms of these divides?
Let me begin, if I may, by saying that if you see a diversity in educational attainment and in professional attainment, let's chalk that up to a great extent to the successes of the civil rights movement.
To the what?
To the success of the civil rights movement. It's a civil rights movement success. If
Yeah.
we have been able to gain access to colleges and universities, it is because of those who came before us and kicked those doors open. And that allowed us to then come in and achieve masters, bachelors, and doctorates, and law degrees, etc. Right? Now, that success is opening opportunities for folks who may take them in a variety of directions. So if you're presuming that some professionals may turn rightward because that is their professional trajectory, may be the case, but there are others that do not necessarily have to follow that professional trajectory. Oftentimes it comes from what they're exposed to, not just in college, but also in their professional circles. So it also has to come from those individuals as well as the circles in which those individuals are in to sustain, if you favor perhaps progressive politics, foster those progressive politics. You know, in the Latino community, we have had, you know, a conservative strain for a long time, all right? It comes from our countries of origin, right? Remember, in our countries of origins, we have had dictatorships, right? There has been an ingrown conservatism there that maybe flourishes here, right? That can also be balanced out with education, and not just education in strict formal educational institutions. It's education that takes place popularly.
I'd like to add something to that. I think something that's really, like, I agree with Carlos, like you're always gonna have that strain, but I think the American dream is not about Latino agency, you know, and you know, that's why I get into the narrative that we tell about our community is really critical, and I think that we as a community, and I have a friend who's working on a book on this, the African American community has a civil rights chronicle that kind of brings it together, right? And there are these chronicas, but with Latinos, we have such diverse experiences. We have, I mean, one community, you have such diversity, class divides, all kinds of regionally, like, you know, so even though we're like not a monolith, we still get treated like that, and we treat ourselves like that, you know? So I think it's very layered in that sense, but one thing that I will say from a personal point of view and experience is that there were, in speaking to what Carlos was saying, you had people like Dr. Antonia Pantoja, who had somebody who fervently believed in Puerto Rican independence and also was mentored by people in the civil rights movement, and other, you know, Dominican, Puerto Rican leaders who came up with institutions that were very youth-focused. So within Aspira, which had a chapter at one time in every high school, it felt like in New York City, you learned about the Aspira process, the 3 A's: awareness, analysis, and action. So there was sort of a grounding. You did an arreto ceremony so that you kind of could ritualize the connection and the commitment to the Aspira process. I'm not saying that everybody walked out of there as a grassroots activist or policy leader, but what I'm saying, I don't know how young people in our community are, how we're sort of like making that like like a ceremony, you know? And it goes beyond achieving professional success and then saying, oh, I'm gonna give back. Because it's not about charity, it's about transformation, and what is all of our agency in that transformation, and what are the aligned steps that we are taking to advance our people and to, as Reverend Rivera said, talk about the human condition and transition it so that we're not being exploited, and that like our successes are not the exception, but actually the norm.
You know, one of these, how people behave is very complicated. You can't just assume that those who go into higher paying jobs are going to become conservative, and those who are not are going to become more liberal. In the United States, the most anti-immigrant group is recently arrived poor immigrants, which is sad. Latin American poor immigrants are very anti-immigrant because they just want the piece of cake for themselves. And if you look at the history, at least of the revolutionaries in Latin America, and even in the United States, Martin Luther King was not from the working class. El Che Guevara was an upper class medical doctor, and from Argentina, the most arrogant around, and he was white. Fidel Castro was an attorney. I'm sorry, I assume there were no Argentinians here, but there might be. I didn't mean it that way, I was just joking. But the truth is, Pedro Albizu Campo was the first, right, Puerto Rican or Latino to graduate from Harvard Law School. So he wasn't a slouch either. So you can't just assume that profession and wealth leads you in a certain way. It's much more complicated than that.
I like to give a contemporary example of this tension. Recently, I was involved on the ground on an issue in the Bronx, and that was Montefiore Hospital is bringing right on their grounds sick patients from Rikers Island to be treated there. A lot of these people, ex-prisoners, are people of color. So I supported it on the ground. Now, I was a homeowner in Pelham Gardens and in that community. But looking at the people that were opposing it were Latino homeowners. You see, or African American homeowners, because these people, remember what I said about upward mobility, they've worked hard to get their home in their mindset.
They thought they worked
so
hard.
now they say this, they've internalized the narrative that bringing these people from Rikers into their neighborhood is going to bring down the value of property. There are going to be all kind of crimes there, whether you believe that or not. I think our data person can give you real information on that, but at least that's the narrative that's perpetuated. One more example, the mayor's affordability agenda, he wants to freeze rents. So the people that are maybe yuppies, want their rent because it's going up too high. But then we have a lot of Latinos that now own small buildings of 6 apartments. A lot of our people have gotten into, and African Americans too. So you have people of color that own these small buildings that are saying, don't freeze my rent because gas is too expensive, this is too expensive. So there's the creative tension. Same community, but people at different, so here I am demonstrating for it, and you got Latinos on the other side, and African Americans and poor white working class labor people saying, no, don't bring those people into the neighborhood. Okay. This is complicated, right?
One last question, and we'll end so that people could buy books, and Eli signed them, Efraín Agosto and Christopher. Okay, so 2 last questions. Just make them short, or make them real questions.
My question was actually for Ali, wherever you are.
Eli.
But I think Erica
The question
pointed
for
to
you.
this as well. The notion that early history, particularly Puerto Rican activists in the 20s and 30s, et cetera, leading up to today, concern for Puerto Rico, the island, and its independence, political independence in the right. And I'm just curious, in your study and statistics, Eli, if in fact that, and maybe Erica can help us with this, is that still the case? In particular, when I read your last chapter, Eli, with the situation with the 2024 election and where the Latino vote was going there, it seemed to be going in a direction, and I worry about people, besides policies, the issue of character of our leaders, right? And whether that's being paid attention to. So 2 questions about 2 sections of your book, Eli, wherever you are, but maybe Erica can pick up on it. The notion of historically Puerto Rican leaders remembering Puerto Rico and its needs. Where is that happening now? And politically, what about the issue of moral character besides issue of policies when Latino vote takes a turn, in some cases, toward the current occupant of the White House?
I'll take the Puerto Rico question. I mean, I serve as a director of a national coalition of leaders and groups of the Boricua diaspora advocating for Puerto Rico. In other words, what we are trying to do is build the clout of the Boricua diaspora, which is like in every state, and to mobilize, to put pressure, et cetera, as people who can vote over here and can organize. And I can tell you from Missouri to Minnesota, Ohio, Chicago, Philadelphia, Florida, New York, there are so many Boricua leaders that are committed to advocating for Puerto Rico. On March 5th, we were able to get a bill introduced in Congress to shut down the Fiscal Control Board. And that came from us, like, really advocating. Now, yes, in this landscape, this climate, it's a long shot, but we don't see inaction as an option. So we've been going through Boricua Advocacy Week. We've mobilized up to Puerto Ricans from up to 15 states and the island to go to DC. We have people that are pushing resolutions in their local jurisdictions, educating on power. So that's our Power for Puerto Rico coalition, on Power for Puerto Rico education. We are working on building a diaspora infrastructure by building our Boricua storytellers, our content creators, with accurate, linking them to the Center for Puerto Rican Studies so that they understand the primary resources within our own community, our Puerto Rican journalists on the island, so they're not taking information from Wikipedia, but taking it from people like Carlos who are experts and contextualizing our own experience so that we're not reproducing any false narratives or any incomplete narratives. We also have Boricuas Holding It Down, which trains emerging community organizers. Some are Boricuas, some are Boricua Dominicanos. That's the layer of our experience. And we train emerging community organizers using a Boricua curriculum. It is culturally competent. And so we talk about the case studies in our community that show our power as a community, our wins, how we have played to win. So from my perch, I can tell you there is a lot of interest, advocacy, people willing to take it to where it needs to be taken to protest the Esencia project in Puerto Rico, to end the Fiscal Control Board, to make sure that we have a decolonization process of the highest democratic participation and integrity. And people feel very passionate about Puerto Rico and la diáspora.
Christopher, quickly, and we have to end it after this so that we could buy the books. Make sure you go straight to the table because the books are mostly gone.
I'll be a quick question. Eli, great book. I've known Eli since we worked together over 20-something years ago. Anyway, what do you think is going to happen with Nydia Velázquez stepping down? She said she's not going to run again, that she wants a new generation of Latino leaders emerging. What do you think? What happened? Don't want to hear me anyway. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen when Nydia Velázquez steps down? Because she says she wants a new generation of Latino leaders, and you realize that New York is about to lose a congressional seat. So that's the question.
Great question.
You know, we see an increase in the number of Latino and Latina specifically elected officials at all levels, local, state, and federal. Yes, we don't know who may win the seat that will be vacated by Nydia Velázquez, but as, for instance, in the case of Puerto Ricans, as we are spreading all over the country, we are electing members of Congress that are Puerto Rican. Right now in New Jersey, last year, we elected Nelly Poe, Puerto Riqueña, from Patterson. Right? So we see a dynamism of our leaders being elected in New York City, but also beyond New York City and beyond New York State. So the fact is that we also need to create the structures, the groups, the institutions that will facilitate the emergence of these leaders. And that comes from, again, not from the political parties that oftentimes neglect us or just pay lip service to us, but from indigenous organizations that are ours and that we can control.
Thank you very much. Let's give our and you can go buy your books and get a signature by Eli Valentin.
So, you want me to?
Yeah.
So I'll be right over there to sign any more books. So I'll be right there. Gabe, can you come and take a picture of the panel, please? Familia, real fast, I want us all to give a round of applause to Dr. Sam Cruz for making this happen tonight. He made it happen. Gracias, Sam.